What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Filsinger Games Character Spotlight with Mike and Broc.
I'm Mike.
I'm Broc, and today we are honored to have a very special guest, the man who put Filsinger in Filsinger Games, Mr. Tom Filsinger. How you doing, sir?
Oh, fantastic. It's good to be here with you and Mike. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
You know, it's funny when you said put the Filsinger in Filsinger Games. Just to mention a story, going back all those years ago, in about 1985 or 6, the first name of the company was CompuCard Wrestling, if you might remember hearing that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to name it. I thought, what the hell do I call this? And I thought, that's such a clunky title. I was trying to make it sound, give it a name that would represent that you're playing with cards. But it didn't work. I didn't like it. I got lazy. It was just pure laziness. I said, just call it Filsinger Games and then we get it over with. I never thought of the implications of that decades later, but it has become therefore associated with me even more so because of the name. But anyway, just a little bit of a tidbit as we get started today.
See, we already got a scoop.
That's what we were aiming for in this. As we mentioned, so what we've been doing in our character spotlights is we'll take two wrestlers. We started off in 2084, 2086, and we slowly moved forward, and we just finished up 2095. So I'm like, well, what would be a good idea is to have Tom, as we go over the 2095 wrestlers, to have you do a review with us and to pick out how you created the characters, naming them, and what went into, all different 10 wrestlers in the sets. And I really remember this set because this is the first Larry Snelly artwork.
Mm. Was it the first one, huh?
Second one.
No, second one, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay.
With so we had Cassandra and Thunder, the Demons of Hydra, Jacket Diamonds and Killer Queen, Fury Pegasus, and Raven and Vigilante. They're the 10 wrestlers.
Yeah.
And so we'll start off with, like we did from the first week, Cassandra and Thunder, the two managers. Now, Cassandra, you continue your streak of naming things after Greek history.
Yeah, I suppose that, let me quickly mention, because I know that we talked about it before we went on the air, that I warned you, and I would like to warn your viewers that after 50 plus game editions, there is sometimes difficulty for me to remember everything about every one of those editions, especially the middle ones, because I remember the first very clearly, but the first is like when you first wake up in the morning, there's nothing else in your head yet. And so it's easy to remember the first things. As we start to move into those middle areas, and I remember the most recent, obviously, for the same reason. I just wrote it. A lot of those middles are difficult for me to remember some details. I will do the best I can.
Oh, I completely get that because it's probably I'm gonna guess over 300 characters you've made.
Yeah, and that's 30 years ago now too.
Yeah. 1991 this was published, so
yeah.
32 years.
And I don't remember, I've only created like 20 bootlegs and I don't remember all them.
So you understand then, right? I talked to Stan Lee once. There was an era in the 50s when they brought back superheroes temporarily because Superman was popular on television. And so Marvel was not doing superheroes at that time. And they thought, let's bring back the ones we had in the 40s. That was Submariner, Captain America, original Human Torch. And they ran them for about a year and then they canceled them again. Well, I said to Stan, that's one of the eras that I think is very interesting, but he forgot it ever happened. He forgot it ever happened at all. And so I'm just mentioning that I watched a special with Doctor Who, Tom Baker. You remember Tom Baker playing Doctor Who?
I grew up with Tom Baker, so.
Great stuff, right? So they had him on a show where he was there to talk about every episode and his memories of it. That was horrible. He couldn't remember half of them. he'd be like, "Oh God, yeah, that." So anyway, I hope to not disappoint people, and I will do the best I can. I've already said
Yeah.
We appreciate it. It's totally understandable because I mean,
Yeah.
as much as you've put into this, I mean, I can't even
Oh, I
imagine.
put everything into it every set. It's
Yeah,
just that then the next year I'm on to the next
right,
one. But
right.
you brought up Thunder and Cassandra right now, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And go on. If you would do your little introduction to that, I will try to add on.
So with Cassandra, we talked about she's one of the few managers. She was around for a little bit. She never got any form of update. She had wrestling stats, and she did well for me. And as a tag team, she's done quite well in the tag team. But when you made her the whole whips and chains look, was there anything
Hmm.
in particular with that drawing, or was that just something Larry had come up with?
No, it definitely would have had my direction, and I definitely would have directed it. I just don't remember directing it. That's all. Um, how many cards did Cassandra have?
Just one, I think.
Just the
Just the
one.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she wrestled with that card too?
Yep.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, who is her feud against?
At that point in time, she didn't have a feud because there was
Oh,
only a couple women wrestlers, like her and Amazonia, and then Miss
Sweet
Liberty
Thing?
comes up.
No Sweet Thing yet?
No, she comes in. I think she.
Sweet Thing was there, but she didn't have wrestling stats yet.
Yeah,
Oh, she was a distractor rating. Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't give you a ton of insight about the Cassandra character.
Oh yeah. And I didn't expect it because she was such a minor,
Yeah.
like a minor. She was with Vanity and Mr. Galaxy, and
Yeah.
but it was
Put
just
some respect on Stud City.
yeah,
But Thunder is different. That evolved into a character that, became a significant character. I
yeah.
can talk a little bit about that. That this is his first year as Thunder in this set is a bodyguard, right?
Hmm.
So he's not wrestling yet.
He's got some stats.
Oh, he does.
Yeah,
Okay.
They're not good.
They're not good yet. Okay.
Right.
Well, that's cool because that's one of those times where we watch somebody start kind of at the bottom, I guess, then and work their way up. And I think a lot of our game fans liked that about the character is to watch him grow.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah.
When, like I said, when I use Thunder, when he did wrestle singles, and they'd make him go, wrestle singles. The rest of the gladiators, nobody came out with him
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it was just like feeding them to the fishes and make them, and they made them take the beatings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
Now that sounds like something they would do.
yeah.
Yeah.
And his character, I thought it was a step up because prior to that they had Fury, and I've made comment on the other shows. I'm like, so Fury was a slave,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, it just seemed everybody in the galaxy was like, oh, gladiators into slavery, that's cool, and they just
Now, did Fury get an update this set?
Yes.
yep.
Okay. And Fury in this set. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to change the subject yet.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
No, that's cool.
What was the progression with Fury at this time then?
He had gone from the guardsman
Yeah. Oh,
to Fury. He had just broken free. Now, I
this.
do remember you talking to me about him, and you said you didn't like him too much.
Mhm. This
And
version, the
that's why,
one in the
yeah.
version in 2095.
And you wrote him out of the game within 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
He,
yeah. Well, then you remember it. Then that's must be true. Oh, that's Snelly, huh?
Yeah,
hmm.
Oh well, he can bite people on the forehead now.
Yeah,
yeah,
officially.
That I remember.
The guardsman did it too,
Oh,
though.
okay, right. And now he's turning against the people who enslaved him.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I was satisfied with that at that time. And I think, Larry captured that pretty well.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite drawings from the set. I like this one a lot.
Hmm.
He
So
was an interesting character. He obnoxious in the fact that it took him forever to get hurt, but he had no offense.
Oh, he one maybe only one level three move on level two offense.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Well, he's a big guy. What was his agility and power?
he had a +3 agility and a -3 power.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, he was gone after 21 or 2096. So he had 1 year after this, and then he was
Oh, and that
gone.
was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me, because you've created so many characters, and I think the rough way you put it was, uh, you you may have an idea for a character, but you just don't have a feel for him afterwards, and so
Mhm.
you just kind of, you had written him out with Fury, you just didn't feel him.
Well, and a lot of that feel part is because I play still. If
Yeah.
I didn't play, I don't think I would really know what works and doesn't work. So the playing, and I'm really happy. I don't have to force myself. I actually still consider Champions of the Galaxy to be my favorite game. And so whenever I'm done creating and I get it in the mail, I'm excited to put the cards in their proper spots on the teams and to restart my Fed. And it's through playing the characters that I see these two make a good team together. You get that feel comes through that more than
Mhm.
anything for me. And so, anyway, that I must not have been having that feeling when I was using that character. And my feelings are probably similar to other people that play. I would like to think that we kind of all, in some ways, think in a similar way, or we feel the characters in a similar way. I'm sure not all the time, but I think some of the time.
Oh yeah, I played with Fury. I think he lasted 5 or 6 years with me before I was like, I've had enough of this guy, and just
Mm.
cycled him out myself.
What year are you up to now?
I'll be entering 2106.
Wow, I love it. Uh,
So this
you
stuff
have
is
to
still pretty fresh.
you have to outlive me by about 10 years to really get caught up, when unless somebody else is writing it after I'm, you know, in that great galactic ring in the sky. Um,
I think a lot of what happened with Fury and where he get quote unquote lost in the shuffle as a catchphrase of mine on here is that he was just surrounded by so many megastars on the war team that I think he just kind of like he was just there at that point because you had
oh,
Mace, Dregs, and
yeah. Can I
you know,
make another general observation? I
yeah,
don't want to hijack your agenda. Um, when I was looking this over a little bit today, I looked over the handbook briefly just to get a feel for what we'd be talking about. I was like, oh my God, this handbook looks so much easier to have written. It's not nearly, the what I'm writing now is three times as long as whatever was done back then.
hmm
And the character and story development has just progressed greatly. It's been, I think, a natural evolution of the game. I'm not saying it's better or worse because I think that worked in its time. All I note is that I went through each individual character in the handbook, much shorter than what I'm writing now for each individual character in the handbook. Um, I thought that jumped out at me when I was looking at it.
hmm
And there were a lot of people active. I don't know
yeah,
what the size of the roster was. It looks like it's more people active then than now.
Oh yeah,
And I'm saying more about the people now than back then.
yeah. The rosters back in the earlier games, they were huge. You're at some point you hit, I think, 60 plus wrestlers in the Fed.
Wow.
So that's
And
why
I
that's
could
why
see
Broc was
that.
saying it was easy to get lost in the shuffle.
I could see that when I was looking at all the affiliations. They just kept going and going and going. And some of them weren't huge teams. Some of them were really just two or three person groups, practically just tag teams and somebody else. And I was writing it down and I was like, wow, this goes on a while. There's the beautiful people, the Savage Kingdom, the Renegades, Asylum, Destruction Incorporated, and on and on.
Yep.
I could name them all, but I mean, it winds up being well over a dozen. And when I look at what I'm writing right now, it is far fewer, but like I said, a lot more being said about the characters. And what I'm liking about what I'm doing now, not knocking what I did in the past at all, because everything has its place, is that with a smaller, leaner Fed, I am able to show how the different characters interact with each other across these teams,
Hmm.
which would have been harder. Well, not only was it harder to do back then, I didn't even try to do it back then. I guess it was just too much.
Yeah.
So anyway, now I'm just contrasting things. So
No,
apologize.
no, totally cool. This is what we wanted.
Okay. Well,
All,
good.
all the on what goes into in your thought process. So the next up we'll have that the Demons of Hydra.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Now these guys, every last person, it's you got the idea from the Killer Bees.
Yeah.
Like that was, I think you had even mentioned that before. You just thought it was such a great gimmick, you had to bring it
Right.
into the game. And that for me, I popped because I loved the Killer Bees. They were the first wrestlers I ever met.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I met them. They did a Hostess potato chips, gave away stickers, and the British Bulldogs came the one week, and I missed them.
Hmm.
And the Killer Bees followed them up the
Oh,
next, and
wow.
I still have my autographed Killer Bees photo of Jumping Jim Brazil and B. Brian Blair.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
awesome. Isn't that cool too? How we progressed to the point where B. Brian Blair is like a friend of ours now, a supporter, where we're all
Hmm.
working together. I just think that's awesome the way we have become integrated into the wrestling community. But you're right. Wrestling always was an influence. You always wanted to be aware of what was happening there. You didn't want to copy what they were doing, but you wanted to be influenced by it. And that idea of masked teams, pulling stunts like that, it seemed to be good and a good move to do something new with Khan and Mitsuko.
And I mentioned that on our previous show when we talked about how that was such a great red herring
Mhm.
Hmm.
with Khan and Mitsuko, because you kept it up for years
Kept what?
that it could be Khan and Mitsuko under the mask.
Oh, I was not revealing that at that time. Huh?
Yeah, you didn't reveal that for years.
And what happened? Did I say? Well, how did I lead people off the trail with Khan and Mitsuko? Then where did they go?
Oh, you just said Genghis Khan one time was spotted at an airport.
Yeah, it was as
Now I
simple as that.
remember that. Now I remember that.
It was great. You trolled us for years.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Now that comes to me. Yes.
I think these cards came out several years before I was even introduced to the game, and people were still talking about it when I started playing. And I think I was part of around for the reveal with whenever it was actually two new characters and not Kana
I'll be
Mitsuko.
darned. Okay. And were the clues laid out where like people like you guys could figure it out, or were you stumped?
No, everybody was something because your clues weren't that bang on. You were keeping it vague on purpose,
Hmm.
and I just thought it was like an update, like because I was still kind of current back then, and so I knew what was going on, and I remember everybody was like, it's Kana Mitsuko under a mask. It was a cross between the Collector and Darkos.
So people did figure it out. A lot of people did.
The odds are there probably were people going, no, it's probably two new guys. It can't be them.
Oh, so it was both. Okay. It was kind of like you remember when they had the giant machines, they had people like Andre
Yeah.
put on a mask,
Yeah,
and everybody knew who it was that you were supposed to know because they were beating the system with
oh yeah,
that
there was the
phony
Hogan machine,
mask
Hulk
stuff.
machine, I think. Or
Yeah, so it might have been around that same time. I don't know if that was going on around the same time or maybe, yeah, it must have been.
and the Piper machine. Yeah,
Yeah, but what we were supposed to know, it was their way, I think, of beating an unfair suspension or something.
Yeah, it's funny.
yeah. It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, but you were dedicated to keeping that one going.
Okay, good. And I still am. Some mysteries like who killed Massacre, things like that are good to keep going a while with just a. See, it's really hard to write something where you're going to reveal because when the reveal happens, the reaction you want people to have is, oh my God, I'm shocked, but it makes sense. You
Hmm.
don't want, I'm shocked. And the clues were bad clues and they were just horrible. In other words, you want to get shock and make sense. And that's a hard thing to do because if you put too many clues out there that are guessable, then too many people get it and they're not shocked at all. And then the opposite is they're shocked because the clues were bad and misleading.
Hmm.
And so I just want to say that from a writing point of view, you got to really balance those things out.
Yeah, it probably would be tough. I've never tried to write a murder mystery or anything like that. But what when you watch like Murder on the Nile or something like that, and the first time you watch it, you don't see anything, but the second time you're like, ah, there was that clue. There it was there. When
Hmm.
you backtrack, that's when you see it all. So that's what
And that's what I've still got that going on now. And a lot will come out in 2139, where you just got to put enough out there for people to say, oh my God, now I can see what that meant looking back easier than going forward.
yeah.
But it's acceptable. That's the key. It needs to be acceptable. And I hope that succeeded with Khan and Mitsuko. I cannot remember how the reveal took place and how people took it.
I think people were shocked.
Hmm.
In the right way again, and
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a good thing, and it caught people off guard because people were like, you know, you know, I myself included, I thought it was Kana Mitsuko just had gone under, an upgrade.
Yeah.
Because why not give Genghis Khan an upgrade? He's been with he's been with
Yeah.
the game for a long time. He
Yeah. Yeah.
probably one of the guys that deserved it. So that's what I thought they were. Because they were the Eastern Dynasty was a tag team. I thought this was just the next generation.
Hmm.
That they got a little bump.
Once they got unmasked, what did they do? Do you remember?
They're still masked with me. I
Hmm.
don't know when they get unmasked. I know their next upgrade is Damon and Hydrax.
Oh. Oh. Okay. Okay.
So that's a few years down the road.
Okay. Got it.
And then we can pop on to the guy who's probably got some of the biggest as like to come up would be Pegasus.
I thought you were going to say him. Yeah.
Yeah. This drawing was great. He's big, smarmy looking. I thought Larry did a great job at getting a guy to look like an arrogant prick as possible.
Right. I could you put it up to the oh
Yeah.
no, it wasn't. Oh, I now I'm getting your shot. Yeah. Well, there you go. I wish that I again had access to our first attempts. I don't remember them now. I know I really intended this guy to be big. I mean, this was a big character. Uh, that's what I remember at the time.
Yeah, he was another one of these guys. It's funny because when I see the cards, the first thing I do is I'm like, because I know you're proud of your Greek history. I used to get the cards like, how many Greek references can I find per set?
And a lot of them really are accidental. And what I mean by accidental is they're just a part of my
Of who
knowledge and
you are.
background. Yeah.
Hmm.
And they just sort of creep into things. Like doing the Greek gods at the beginning. Um, if I even wasn't Greek, I might have done that because I thought, here we've got the far-flung future. What's the earliest past of wrestling?
Yep.
And it struck me that goes back to Greek Olympics, and so it made sense to make those characters because I wanted that contrast of old prehistory and then the ultra modern. I thought
Hmm.
that was a good contrast. To be honest, I wish I developed Proteus and Actagon even more because while the Gladiators, Bruton Massacre, lasted a long time on the power of their characters, Actagon and Proteus seemed to, I don't know, maybe they got lost in the shuffle a little bit. That's possible. I could be wrong.
With
I
them,
just think with the Greek gods, they just couldn't keep up.
Yeah. Oh, I see. That's the way you saw it. Well, that
Yeah,
makes sense too. Yeah. People out of their time. Yeah.
yeah.
and with them, you could always bring them back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, here's another thing. I'm glad you said that. What's been very important to me with Marvel doing multiverse and that becoming like the biggest concept parallel universes, which I really like that a lot. But the key to making that work is to not let it get chaotic. So the GWF timeline has maintained a very strong linear basis. And all these spin-offs are just clearly taking place somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very important to keep the timeline pure in that regard. And I hope that pays off. Because like I said, if it becomes chaotic, you wind up like Marvel and DC have had to do this for years, where they have to start all over again,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many things have happened, and they're dealing not with linear time in their universe. They're dealing with some weird, unknown time that doesn't really happen. In other words, if Peter Parker just can't possibly still be in his 20s or
Mm-hmm.
30. He was
Right.
a teenager in 1963. So you've got to pretend like every Christmas he never really aged. And so what I'm saying is, see, that's the problem you get into. And so they've had to try to configure ways to make that seem plausible. Now, in pro wrestling, you still have a linear timeline because it's actually based in reality. People do actually get older. Sure, you can prolong their oldness. You have The Undertaker fight Brock Lesnar when The Undertaker's 60. Now, in real life, he'd get destroyed. But you have him in a fictional universe, you can have him still have a decent match. And then he lost. I think his streak ended to Brock Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
But at least it's still a linear timeline.
Right.
We're trying to do both in the GWF. And that's fascinating to me as a person who's trying to write it, is that we're combining comics and wrestling, and we have to deal with the pros and cons of doing that. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm maybe rambling in the wrong directions.
No, not at all.
That's the one thing too I find interesting about the game, is because you have different races. You don't know how they age.
That's right. That's right.
Like Lance Atlas is supposed to be hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
So, he could just keep on wrestling an Infinity and Infinity Plex. They're,
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right about that. And especially with something over 100 years in the future and cosmic, the only people I guess I should be really focusing on age realistically is with the humanoid characters, like, what I mean is people from Earth and
Mm-hmm.
Titan. And yet, but who's that? Perfect Specimen today. And now I'm getting confused between going back and forth in these eras. Well, who else? You've got Tank, people like that. So the Shane. However, 100 years in the future, even for Earth people, when you think of all the ways that advances could take place in medicine and sports and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it's possible that in 100 years, Lord Nexus or somebody could be 120 and still in good shape. We don't know. It's 100 years in the future.
True.
So you're right. Not only could aliens go on for a long time, but technically, really, my humanoids could too. But we can't do that. And the reason we can't do that is because if the same people are constantly there, there's no newness. And so phasing people out helps keep it fresh. So there you go. I mean, I guess the point is I have a lot of latitude as a writer to do whatever I think is interesting, because of you can justify just about anything in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's neat with the way you do your stories, because sometimes we have Jeff Manning with us, and how we work the GWF is Broc is a mixture of he follows a storyline, creates his own. Jeff is strictly by the book, so if he follows that book 100%, and I don't even read the books. I've created my own story arcs right from the start. I followed the first one to get my foot in the door, but after that, I get completely lost on where.
Wow, that's interesting. The range we have of people. That's cool.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's completely different. So when we talk, we all have different outcomes on where guys go and what they've done. And
oh, that's cool.
So
Yeah.
with Pegasus, for Jeff, for Pegasus was an average guy. He didn't do too much with them. because that card, he had such a high pinfall. Soon he took one, he was a 5'8".
Yeah.
So as soon as he took if he's fighting a guy like Wolf, one savage face claw, he needs a 9 to kick out.
What did you say his pin was high?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had
What
a 5
was it?
pin.
Really?
8-5. Yeah.
We mean, that is high. Did he, how many downs though?
He only
Just
had one
one.
with an
Yeah,
option to
see, back
leave.
in
So
those days still. See, and now I try to talk about it like realistically. Why have perhaps wrestlers gotten better? Because the cards have gotten perhaps better.
Yeah.
And I've tried to avoid that, but it's impossible to totally avoid power creep we were talking about. That we would just have to say in those days, just like you would say in the NBA in the 1950s, well, LeBron James is just obviously way better than anybody else back then. In fact, even the average NBA player is way better than anybody else back then. A sport progresses. And so Pegasus might have been better in his time because it was a different time.
Okay, so like for me, Pegasus, and I talked about this. I came up with an interesting storyline for Pegasus, and my Fed is because he couldn't get any traction with me. Like I think he captured one Intergalaxian title, and that was it. So I had him retire a year early before he got his new updated card, and he just disappeared. Like he was booked for a match, never showed, and that was the last anybody saw of him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all part of a storyline. A year later, with the new updated Pegasus, he comes out with to make a save when Chaos and then we're beating on like Alpha Force or something like that. And he comes out and makes a save, so he gets a huge like people are like, "Oh my God, this is Pegasus!" Like, so I made the people completely forget about him. It was the old, the heart grow, the heart, what is it, fondness or something along that lines. So
absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I think it's
So
great. It's like having a wrestler leave a territory for a
yep.
while and then return, and it's always big when they return. Because right, like you said, if the character's really not doing much for you, it's hard to somehow build them up out of nowhere. But if they've been gone, it's fresh. So that turned out to be a good move.
And it worked well for him because he that's when he got his new update, so he came back even stronger.
Right. Yeah.
Now he's won a couple heavyweight championships, so he's done well. And that was the whole thing with that Pegasus. That first card, I love the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I love the arrogance, and I try to make him one of the most arrogant characters next to Vanity.
Yeah.
And he could back it up a little more, but again, he got caught up in some heavy duty feuds, and he just couldn't recover from those feuds because of that pinfall.
Right.
Like
Although sometimes when you got a guy with only one down, you could go forever only just hurting them.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it's weird because I had Mad Jester, who's got the same pin, a 5'8" with one down, and Mad Jester went on to win my longest consecutive winning streak at 16 consecutive matches.
Man.
Without a loss, just all.
And technically Pegasus had a better card, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's funny how that works. Your Pegasus didn't do much for me either. It's funny how that well, we've got a couple of people in this set. I won't go into it now much. And their names are escaping me. They're on, oh God, Dregs and Mace. They're in this set, aren't they?
Oh, they were the set prior.
But they're okay, yeah, they're active at this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They never won a belt for me, I don't think, ever.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how that can happen with some people. I just had some people and then others who overperformed in my Fed. I'm sure that's happened to both of you.
Mm-hmm. It's all a shoot.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
The dice.
I mean, I'm still writing the game as if wrestling is 100% on the level.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still writing it as if it's that way.
So we can move on to Killer Queen. We've discussed Killer Queen at length on here sometimes. I know for me and a lot of other people, we thought you went out on a huge limb back in 1986, and we every last person I know assumed Killer Queen was the first openly gay wrestler. Like
Yeah,
right across the board, every last person, we were like, it was huge for the game because, and you never come out and say it if he
mhm.
is or not, but everyone just assumed because of his name, how he looks, how his actions
Sure.
in the ring.
Yeah, yeah. I even had people wonder if Vanity was because they were a
Yeah.
tag team. So I don't know, but all I'm saying is, yeah, uh, we wanted, variety back then, of
Yep.
course, and people can interpret characters however they choose. And Killer Queen to me always was a fun character, and we've had, I don't know if we've had many characters like that over the years. Maybe Killer Queen was mostly. Um, so anyway, go on though if you want to talk about Killer Queen. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a completely unique character in the sense that we've never seen he was like the gorgeous George of his era. We
Yeah,
haven't
that's
seen
true.
anything
Yeah.
like him since. He
Yeah.
was the first one, and you haven't really seen anything. Vanity was kind of a little bit lower than him.
Yeah.
And then when he got this updated card, it was interesting because it was almost a lateral move. So his card was good, and like he went down just a touch. It wasn't enough to
Hmm.
make him an instant, jobber, but the
Did he
move was
retain did he
almost
retain
lateral.
tag did he retain tag abilities?
He still had some tags.
Hmm.
He lost his double finisher, which hurt him, but you gave him a +1 finisher. And most people would take two double zeros over a single +1 any day.
Yeah, I would too, yeah. Who was Killer Queen feuding with in 2095?
2090. Um,
Mm.
it'd be him, Jack of Diamonds, and King Lear.
King Lear, there's another thing. Yeah.
So he was teaming up. Killer Queen was teaming up with Jack of Diamonds at this point in time. I don't have
Hmm.
the book because I don't even know where my books are.
Yeah. I was looking at a book today, yeah. Online, an online version of it. Okay, no, I just wondered. I just wondered.
He uh he was a very interesting character in that fact that um we haven't seen anything like it. And did you get the name from the Queen song?
Not consciously. You know, so right, it might be just, there's so many things that you absorb in society and in pop culture.
Hmm.
And so no, it wasn't direct, but it probably was, you know, influenced, in a unconscious way, because it seemed like the perfect name for a character like that.
Yeah. Oh, he was one of the more interesting characters in that first, especially that first 24. He was a standout because the way he looked. He had a nipple ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck Carter was proud of himself about that. Because that wasn't me instructing that one. That was Chuck doing that, and that wound up being well ahead of its time.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, as I said, that character was literally ahead of its time. And in this day and time, he would be a very popular character in amongst a certain group of people. And that's just the way I've always looked at him in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, we're pretty good.
Trailblazer.
What is that, 40
Yeah,
years ago?
trailblazing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very progressive, especially for the 80s.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't really, I'd like to take credit for that, but I honestly don't think it really was because, in pop culture, it already had it's David Bowie's, it's Boy
Yeah.
George's, it's Alice Cooper's. And so and because of that, when we released it, it really wasn't controversial.
Hmm.
People just accepted it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the thing about wrestling. I think as a group, the wrestling fans are more accepting than I think any other group of fans in sports.
No, that's a good point,
Like,
especially with Gorgeous George being way back in the
yeah.
50s.
Well, you,
Hmm.
you look at now, if you can, assume that there's a biker zombie who can go and beat people for 22 years, you're like, yeah, I'm cool with that. That's believable.
Right. And you had Exotic Adrian Streak. That goes back to
Yep.
the 70s, I believe.
Hmm.
Who's, a Killer Queen-ish, same mold. So there was always experimentation with wrestling with those because wrestling would do anything to get a reaction.
Yep.
And they didn't care. And in society, it wasn't like it is today where people, are ready to jump all over everything like they are now. Back then, they would just put out all these different things and let people react the way they want to react. Today, it's not so easy to do that.
True.
But we can move on to his tag team partner, the Jack of Diamonds.
Okay.
This is a great character. He reminded a lot of people of Gambit from the X-Men.
Yeah, I never that thought never occurred to me until you bring it up right now, and I could see that. I understand.
Yep.
Who
I was
debuted
not
first?
in those days. I was not a reader of X-Men, and so I for so that definitely is not a direct influence. But I'm sticking to the court-related themes.
Oh yeah.
That's the way that came out. I liked the drawing. I do remember that, and I liked working with Larry Snelly quite a bit because as Chuck was starting to become busy with other things, and I thought 2093 was a tough addition because we were working at a distance. He was in a different state. We were working snail mail because faxes weren't really taking off yet. And in fact, the first person I worked on faxes a lot with was Larry Snelly. And I didn't like it because the fax quality was always pretty poor. So you'd get a fax and it was so faded that you couldn't really see the artwork that well. But the good thing about Larry Snelly was he loved working on the game back then. And he would send me 50 drawings and say, which ones do you like? And we would kind of work that way where I'd say, I'm liking this, and then please change in this way. But I'm pretty sure he got Jack of Diamonds really quick because I don't know how you guys feel about that art, but I liked it.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really solid.
I was always a fan of the Royal Court, and because I was that whole even if you kept it up, the jester, the counts, the kings, the queens, the jack. I always thought it was great, and I still keep them around.
Yeah. Well, in bringing them back, I again thought where we mix comics and wrestling. If you've got a concept that worked, why not update it for the modern times? And you can't overdo it because you don't want to do what professional wrestling does, where your ratings are down. So we got to bring back an old timer. And that's just a temporary measure. That doesn't really solve the long-term problem. And I'm not going to ever do that, where I'm going to bring back people just because I want to get some bang surprise out of people, because that doesn't help for the long run. And I forgot why I brought that up, but I'm just oh, I know, because when I brought back a new Exo King, a new Killer Queen, and a new Death Knight, I thought this is cool because it fits a storyline that I think actually works pretty well. And the characters really are quite different from what they were originally, which Marvel likes to do too, by the way, by taking characters and giving them modern update. And so to have Killer Queen be a female, I thought that'll be interesting because that's the name. Let's go with it. To make Exo King a black man, I thought, good. That's a lot of people are doing things like that. And Death Knight's always been a favorite. I knew when I was bringing back Death Knight that I'd at least make one person deliriously happy.
We don't want to mention Pete Beck's name, but we're just
yeah.
I remember a story. That set got lost in the mail for him, and I sent him a message saying, "Hey, did you get your 2137 set yet?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Why?" I go, "Never mind." Because I didn't want to spoil it for him.
Yeah.
See, with Jack, he's one of these guys. I used him for a couple of years. He didn't do anything, and I've talked about this.
Hmm.
I run three promotions. I run my GWF, my NGA, and my CPC. And how the wrestlers move up and down is I use a point system, and I base it on European soccer. So the bottom two guys and bottom tag team drop down. The top tag team and the top two singles move up.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle for the NGA, it's the top. So the NGA is the busiest because they'll have 8 wrestlers interchange. So I have a lot of action in that fed. And Mace had got dropped down, and Jack of Diamonds had bumped up. So I put Jack and Mace together as a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And they won multiple tag team titles, and they bumped up to the GWF. They rejoined Warrior, and they took Chaos and Matador to the limit on a couple of occasions now.
Truly, that's pretty good.
And it was just a weird combination, but it works so well.
You had Chaos and Matador as a tag teams, huh?
Yeah.
Man, that's a tough team. Mm-hmm.
I put them together because in my fed, they want to capture as much gold as humanly possible.
Okay. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. And so just I run a big tournament, and Jack and Mace made the final 4 and went up against Chaos and Matador and just took them to the limit, like almost won the whole tournament. Now Chaos and Matador won the whole tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But just pairing up 2 random characters from, almost from the same year, like 2095 and 2094, and they worked out perfect. But it's something you never would have thought of, and that's one thing I like about creating my own storylines and such, because then you're going to get matchups and pairings that you never thought you'd ever do anything with.
Yeah.
And then we can finish off with Raven and Vigilante.
Yeah. Well, Raven, that was the headliner. And, he came, we had a wonderful drawing there. And I was very satisfied with that. Let's just leave it at that.
And he was, he was one of these guys that what shocked a lot of people is he had a double finisher, but both the finisher was +1 and a +2.
Mm-hmm.
So you really you made it where he's going to make an impact because of how tough he is.
Yeah. Well, that was the goal with him. And like I said, I think Larry delivered a really strong drawing. Whenever you create a character that you think is the headliner, you really need to have a strong drawing to go with it. Yeah. To me, and this is strictly personal because my judgments might be different from somebody else's, it ruins it if you don't love the drawing of a key character. And that's why there's so much pressure on that one drawing. I keep telling people, Marvel Comics or even professional wrestling, Marvel Comics, if you've got a new character in a comic book, you've got like 50 drawings of them in the comic. There's a lot of ways to enjoy it. With Champions, you had one. And if the one is good, you're great. Like, for example, a few years ago when I did an update on Azuma, the drawing was fantastic. I loved it. And it was the opposite problem. I thought Azuma's not going to be that great. But man, this drawing, I got to have this guy be a little better because he looks like a badass. He really does. Mm-hmm. So I had to improve him a little bit. And then sometime, like when the 2093, which the Alpha Force drawing in 2093 was always, to me, the letdown of that 3-part series. Because you had Matador successful in 2091.
That Matador drawing is phenomenal.
Yeah. And then Chaos, that really changed the game in a lot of ways. That was like a huge thing. But that was all leading to the next one. The good guy to fight these 2 bad guys. And that was the worst part. That was the letdown part. And I tried to redeem it very quickly by having Larry redo Alpha Force, but it was already a little late for that. And I love that drawing. But if I'd have had that in the first place, it might have helped that whole thing. But I didn't. And it's one of those things where you have to make adjustments as you go along.
Was
So
that the
go on.
first special edition card, that Alpha Force?
Yeah. Well, I had a draw off between Mike Gustovich, I believe. No, never mind. I guess I'm getting my memory wrong, my history wrong. I definitely, as a way of testing Larry Snelly, had him draw Alpha Force. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that was part of the hiring, and that I loved that drawing, and I decided I had to release it. Is that the first special edition card or not?
I think so.
It might be.
Because, right, I wanted to correct what I
Yeah, it
thought was
is.
a
It
letdown,
is.
in my view.
And then with this set, you released Brute Massacre and Bishop Hell with
I
a
didn't
field
even like the
card.
Alpha Force story. I just thought the whole thing was fumbled at the end, and you just got to move on, you know.
And then with Vigilante, Galactic Punisher was always an interesting character, but now this Vigilante character, it's like Larry just took it to a
Yeah.
whole new level.
I liked it. Is he already linked with Soldier of Fortune in this set?
Soldier of Fortune comes out. Um,
He was in the previous set, so
yeah.
yes.
So
So
they're tagging up already in 2095?
yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Because I really liked that tag team, and they were they were very successful for
Oh
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked about that on the show the one time because I remember talking to you about it and going over the names because you were like, yeah, you were going to call them uh you called them the mercenaries,
Mm.
which I thought was a great name, and I was like, because we this is going back when you would bounce ideas off of different, some of the more veterans, the inner circle, as a couple of the guys
Oh, did
called
I
it.
do that where at Galacticon and stuff?
Um, yeah, or we just talk on the phone.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah.
But a couple of the people, referred to like Tim and Chad and Steve and myself as the inner circle.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Well, they've been right. Go on. Yeah.
I remember arguing, not arguing, but I'm like suggesting names because you're like, yeah, the mercenaries, and I'm like, or above the law, just things like this, and I'm like, I
Mm.
always like the name Body Count. Now
Yeah.
it's got a different meaning back nowadays, but back then it was like, because they're just going through the teams one after another, and I'm like, that's a great name, but mercenaries for them is also a solid name because they were the hitman for hire.
Right, right.
So it worked out good, and I'm like, both those were just good like names. But I've never used the team mercenaries.
Mm.
I like my name, and I'm like the body count. But they belong to a bigger group called the mercenaries. So I just took
Yeah.
that as one big mass group.
Oh, cool. Okay. When was Mike Fortune Hitman for Hire introduced?
2108.
Oh, it took till 2108. Okay.
Yeah, that's when me and Greg showed up.
Oh, right. Oh my God, that was the time travel story. It had to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. That was cool. Those were fun times. Uh, but as for the mercenaries, I thought that worked. I liked the art in both cases. And like I said, if you like the art, then here's what happens. When people like characters, they push them for belts. That's
Hmm.
what they do.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of a barometer of how well the character's over, is if they're winning gold in people's promotions.
Right.
So it's not just about dice rolls. It's not just about luck. Uh, I don't know what degree you do it, but sometimes I do. When I'm playing, I actually prefer that somebody would win. And when they don't, it kind of messes up where I was trying to take them. And I think the challenge of the game is to actually make those bumps in the road work by thinking of something new instead of lamenting it and trying to fix it.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes it's through that the best feuds and stories develop is from something that was a failed attempt to build somebody up because maybe they just had a cold streak out of the gate and they might need to have a new beginning in 6 months, where
Yeah.
when their hot streak starts, well, let it go. But it requires openness. And I think it's actually harder to book the GWF than the WWE or any of the wrestling promotions
Right.
because they just do whatever they want.
Hmm.
But with us, when we play, we have to, unless we cheat, we have to live with the result of what happened.
Hmm.
And it's tempting to cheat. Have you ever had that happen? Where
It's
something
tempting.
is just so wrong that you're like, I'm not gonna accept that. I'm gonna take that over.
I've never done it. No,
Me
I have
neither.
cheated. I have cheated in a match. I had a Man Mountain Brute match where I'm just like, it's a draw.
And then the
So
TV time
you've
expired.
never done that. Okay.
No,
That's tough sometimes
It
because
it is
is.
sometimes you
because
really want to go somewhere.
yeah, I've had my favorite wrestler. I'm like, you build them up, and I've watched Broc do this on his live stream when he runs his promotion, and you'll introduce somebody or you give them a big story arc, and they lose to Death Knight, and you're like, son of
Yeah.
a.
Yeah. 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 And
So we don't
some
appreciate.
people, I don't know. I mean, some people probably finagle it, but I don't know. Everybody's got a different way to handle that. But the
I,
good way is that builds up Death Knight instead of
right,
it
right.
kills so and so,
You got
or
to
it
follow the
means
dice. That's mine.
you're going to have a longer term feud with Death Knight that will eventually be won, and you'll have to look at it like, well, he got past Death Knight, he proved that, and now he's moving on. It all depends on how you handle it.
Hmm. I have a funny story. Whenever Future Shock came out with Chaos Supreme, I did a new jumping on point at my Fed, and I was going to play it at the comic book store I worked in. So I set up the fight card, and I was trying to get a bunch of new people to play. So the first Chaos Supreme debuted against Plethador. I was like, I'll roll Plethador, and I'll let one of my friends play Chaos Supreme, and he'll wipe the mat with him, no question. He loses in 2 moves
To Plethador.
to Plethador.
Oh
And
my.
everybody's like, "You set this up. You wanted to make us. You wanted to win. Whatever." It's like, no,
Uh-huh.
I swear, I was trying to do the opposite of that. So then we set up the next card, had the rematch. He lost again. So I'm like,
What?
the Chaos Supreme came in so cold in this Fed.
Wow.
Like he never really bounced back from it either. But it was just funny that he went 0-2 against Plethador, but by the third match, he
Jeez.
just annihilated him. But
Well, when I would play at conventions to new people, I always let them pick a character they think looks interesting, and it's
mm-hmm.
usually a good person. But I would always try to wrestle them against somebody horrible,
Yeah,
Yeah, that
because
was my
a lot of
attempt.
the times, even people who are just testing the game, they actually want to win the match though with their character. They actually taking it
Mm-hmm.
seriously, and so admittedly, I would sometimes, since we're rolling real fast and they're not looking at my rolls, I'd say with my guy down, even though it was really hurt,
Yeah,
so that they could get a sense of the game and a victory at the same time,
right.
instead of a match that's taking too long or results in an upset that they are not going to be able to understand. Uh,
Right.
that there's an art to playing at conventions
Oh, I'm
to get
sure.
people to appreciate the game the way you want them to.
Hmm.
Yes,
I,
it's just selling. I don't know.
we broke it down the one time because I got asked how Rob Nadon and myself won so many tournaments. Like I've probably won 30 something tournaments at the GWF.
Mhm.
And it's because when the game first came out, Rob and myself broke down all the math and all the
Oh,
odds. Okay,
uh-huh.
if I do this choice, if I'm on A, B, or C ratings and this, and and that's just what we did. And a lot of guys back then didn't do it. They just re-roll. I'm like, I'm actually not going to re-roll. I'm going to do the turnbuckle because you're a C. You're going to go in, or it's a death jump. You're a B. I'm going to do the death jump to try to get the pin instead of rolling up, and we'd get the win. So we broke down the math very fast,
Mm-hmm.
and people weren't doing it back then,
Yeah.
and it
Well,
helped us along.
yeah, I'm playing a Legends Fed right now with one of the guys that plays is totally strategy. Storylines don't mean anything to him.
Hmm.
All he's looking for is odds. Let's see, if I roll up What is your turnbuckle rating? Because that's part of the decision whether to roll up or not. And what is your power? And I mean, he's doing it very mathematically. I do that most of the time, but sometimes I say to myself, what do I think this character would do? This
Yeah.
character might be more reckless than that. Maybe the intelligent wrestlers, I say, would, try to break it down. But your basilisks and your people like that are probably not going to do that. They're just going to take a risk.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Mayhem was the first guy. I'm like, no matter what I do, I roll, he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just throw somebody out. You might be DQ'd, but he would do that. Right.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
He was 100%. Here's before our time's getting low, but here's one question we've brought up on many things. When you wrestle men versus women, do you do it? And if you do you use the chart where the women reduce all their stats?
No, I don't do it. If I have mixed tag matches, a male and a female against a male and a female, the rule is when the man's in, he has to tag out to the man, the other one does, or vice versa. So I don't do much of the intermingling.
Okay,
So if I did, I don't know what I would do. Everybody's got to just make their own decision. What do you guys do?
Well, in the official rule book, it's the women have to use the chart.
Yeah, but it's up to you, promoter. I mean,
Yeah.
that was written probably a long time ago.
Oh yeah, but it's just one of those rules that because still to this day in this game, people will wrestle the game differently.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure, I believe that, and I think they should. I mean, I really think they should do whatever they think works for them. That's what we're about, actually.
Like it took me like 4 years of going to Galacticons before I started using the choice charts.
Now, I like that. It slows the match down. That's what I don't like about it. However, I do think having some choices is part of an important part of a game to give it some complexity and decision making. But it does slow it down until you get to a point where you memorize it. And I'm to that point where I've pretty much memorized the charts and memorized all these choices so that I can immediately come to a conclusion about what I'm going to do. Maybe you're to that point too. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we should wrap this up.
All right.
Hopefully we can get you back and do a recap on 2096.
Oh, okay, sure. I'll do this anytime. It's nice to look back. Now, honestly, it was really an eye opener to look at the handbook and to see how differently I approached the handbook back then than I am right now, since I'm in the middle of it. So I enjoy it, and I enjoy talking to people about the game. That's just something I love doing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Sure. Good to see you guys always.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been, like I said at the beginning, too long.
Yes, it is. So I look forward whenever you want to do it again, just let me know.
Awesome. Sounds great. We're going to hold you to it.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks.
Take care, guys.
You too. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening or watching, however you consume this product here on YouTube. Another thank you to our fearless leader, Mr. Tom Filsinger, for taking time to talk about the older sets here with us today. While you're here, if you have not yet, please click that subscribe button below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. And also, down in the description below, you'll find links to several of our friends who make Filsinger Games related content, including the official Filsinger Games podcast roll-up, the Legends team's Uncharted Territory, Dizzy Dice by Lee Longpre, the Filsinger Games fan cast from Grant. And over here on YouTube, we have Solo Promoter, also from Grant. We have Dave Little's Heartland Championship Wrestling, which he plays live on Saturday nights. And then over on Twitch, you'll find my stuff. I stream Champions of the Galaxy, a bootleg fed, live every Sunday night at 9 p.m. You can find that below. Check those out. And if you have any Filsinger Games related content you'd like to share, please let us know. We'd be happy to include it below and get the word out there for you. So yeah, that's all I've got.
All I got.
Awesome. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Night, everyone.
Later.